Lesson 121, the genitive case. Catherine, in the last lesson, we talked about possession as a general concept and possession in English. And we told our listeners that there are basically two ways in English to show that something belongs to something. And that's, you can use the word of, or you can use an apostrophe with a letter S.
Right.
And the reason I covered that material, well, a couple of reasons. First of all, because apostrophes can be tricky. And second of all, they need to remember how to render these Greek sentences into English.
Right, because now our listeners are getting to the point where they are learning about the genitive case, which is how we express possession in Greek.
And since that can be tricky in English, I wanted to review that in English. So when they see it in Greek, they know how to express it in English. So we're kind of working on both ends of the translation spectrum here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Catherine, the genitive case, as I think about it, the genitive case in Greek can actually be used in all kinds of different ways, not just to show possession.
Right.
It can be used to show comparison. It can be used to show a source that something comes from. It can show separation. It can be used to communicate all kinds of meanings. But in this book, we're just using it in one way. Out of all those ways that you can use it, we're just using it here in this book in an introductory kind of way to show what I think is probably the most common way to use it, and that is to show possession.
Yes, and it's definitely the kind of baseline meaning of the genitive, where unless there's something else in the passage that's indicating that it needs to have another meaning, that tends to be the default meaning of the genitive case. And so that's why it's usually taught as the first way of understanding the genitive case, because it's sort of the default.
So for right now, we're looking at possession. And so when we see a word in the genitive case, we're going to think of that word as possessing another word in the sentence. So we're looking at the genitive singular here, and notice that the ending is the Omicron upsilon diphthong. So we change the ending of our example noun here, Georgos, instead of Omicron sigma in the nominative singular, now we have Omicron upsilon. So it's Georgou. And so Georgou can mean of the farmer, or it can mean farmers with an apostrophe S, F-A-R-M-E-R apostrophe S. So it's a possessive word that will possess another word in the sentence. And if it has a definite article with it, it will be to, tau, Omicron upsilon. So to Georgou means of the farmer. And Catherine, I think that the most simple Greek syntax that I have seen, they'll put the genitive that's possessing something, they'll put it right after the noun that's being possessed.
Mm-hmm.
Not in more sophisticated Greek. In more sophisticated Greek, there are other ways to express that and other word orders that are more complicated. But from what I've seen, the simplest way to do it is to have the genitive that's possessing something coming right after the noun that it is possessing. And so in this book, that's the word order that we will use. And so we see that here in our example sentence, or it's not really a full sentence, it's more of just a sentence fragment. Ho hippos tu Georgou. We have the horse, that's ho hippos in the nominative case. And then tu Georgou is in the genitive case. And so since the word for farmer here is in the genitive case, it shows that it's possessing something. And so it's the horse of the farmer, or the farmer's horse.
Mm-hmm.
So this is extremely simple Greek syntax, and that's the way we'll do it in this book. Just because the folks reading our book are beginners, and it gives them a way to start out working with these cases as they interact with each other.
The other thing to notice is that, like the accusative plural ending, ous, the genitive singular ending, is a long diphthong. And so it's important to note that for pronunciation, for accents, oo is a long vowel. Well, long diphthong.
And that's a great point because we're going to see it not in the word georgu, but in other words, we're going to see it moving the accent one notch to the right in a word.
Right. Like in didaskalos, it will become didaskalu.
Exactly. And as we've said many times, when the Omicron iota diphthong is the last thing in a word, it does not count as being long.
Right.
But this is not that diphthong. This is a different diphthong, the Omicron upsilon diphthong. So it does count as long at the end of a word. So, great point there. We have a few example sentences here to help you get a grasp on the genitive case and how it can be used to show possession. So let's take a look at these example sentences. In the first one, we have a cat stealing someone's cheese. So ho ailuros says the cat, and it's being possessed by tu iatru. That's the doctor, but in the genitive case. So ho ailuros tu iatru says the cat of the doctor or the doctor's cat. And then our main verb is eche. That means he, she, or it has. So the doctor's cat has ton tu ron. That's the cheese, but it's in the accusative case because it's the direct object of the verb eche. So the doctor's cat has the cheese. Here in this one sentence, you've got nominative, genitive, and accusative all working together to create a meaningful sentence.
And one thing to note is the reason why we talked about where the genitive goes earlier is that for sentences like this, it actually is important to know where a genitive usually goes so that we can put it with the right noun. So it's the doctor's cat because tu iatru comes right after ho ailuros. And so it's the doctor's cat, not the doctor's cheese. If we were talking about the cat having the doctor's cheese, then tu iatru would have to go after ton tu ron.
That's right, Catherine. And that's why I put eche after iatru was to show that ho ailuros tu iatru is one sense unit, and then ton tu ron is a different sense unit. So I used word order in that example to sort of partition off the sentence. Now again, in more sophisticated kinds of Greek, we could see different word orders here. In fact, you could possibly see tu iatru coming before ailuros.
Yes.
It could come in different places. It even could come between ho and ailuros. It could be ho tu iatru ailuros.
Yes.
But that's a bit more sophisticated. You can learn about that in the future. Right now in this beginner's book, we're just using the absolute simplest syntax possible.
Exactly.
So again, this syntax is very simple and easy for beginners so they can get a grip on the use of this new case.
The next example sentence is ton kalamon tu didaskalu echo. And here, ton kalamon is in the accusative case, and so it's the direct object. It's not the subject, even though it's the first thing in the sentence. For the subject, we have to go all the way to echo because the subject I is just embedded in the verb echo. So I have direct object ton kalamon tu didaskalu. So the tu didaskalu is the genitive. And so it's the teacher's pen, or the pen of the teacher would be more wooden. Here we have a genitive possessing a direct object. So it's the teacher's pen.
And notice also, Catherine, as you mentioned a minute ago, that in the word didaskalu, the accent has been moved one notch to the right because of the long final syllable. The Omicron upsilon diphthong in that final syllable makes that last syllable long. And so instead of didaskalu, we have didaskalu.
Exactly.
So that's a good thing to notice for our listeners. And finally, a person's name can be in the genitive case too. Notice that in this next example sentence, we have the word telemachos, but it's in the genitive case. So it's telemachu. And again, the Omicron upsilon diphthong is long. It makes that last syllable long. And so we pull the accent one syllable to the right. So it's telemachu. And that's possessing the horse, ton hippon. So it's the horse of Telemachus, or Telemachus's horse.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of hard to say. I want to say Telemachus. So echomen ton hippon, we have the horse, and then telemachu of Telemachus. We have the horse of Telemachus, or we have Telemachus's horse.